Snapchat has some impressive features for creating realistic jewelry inside Lens Studio. From gem rendering to ray tracing to physics, you could use all of these techniques to create the most realistic and beautiful jewelry lens try-on experience. So by now you might have already looked at the earring template in Lens Studio, and you might have played around with some of the settings they have in there, or maybe you've even tried on some of the earrings that they have inside the template. So I'm just going to give you a little work through of how to create your own earrings in Blender, and then how to bring them into Lens Studio and use the earring template with everything deleted from the template and just starting it from a clean slate. So I'm going to go into Blender now and give you a little run through of some earrings I created and how I created them. So here we are in Blender, and here is my earring. I'm going to turn off the bones, and so you could just look at what I set up. So I made this fairly quickly in about 5 minutes, just using a couple of primitives. The way I set this up is by adding a sphere and then making it really small so that it could be the top part of the object. And then I added in a torus, going to mesh, going to torus, and these are the settings on the side of the torus, and then I rotated it on the Z-axis, and then I positioned it underneath that object, and then I duplicated it and rotated it, and then underneath that I added another sphere, except just a little bit smaller, and then I added a diamond by going to mesh and then adding in a diamond. And so just to resize this, I can type S01 and then move that over there. And so now with my diamond made, my earring is done. I'm going to add an armature. So I'm just going to select all of that. Oh, actually no, first I'm just going to add the armature by going to armature right here and just making this smaller and bringing it up to the top and putting it above the circle here. Then I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm just going to click on the base and click E and add a new bone there, and then add another with E again, and then add another here, and then another one for this little circle, and then another one for this base diamond. And so now I'm going to go into object mode, just make sure everything is lined up properly, and I'm just going to select all these objects again just by selecting them all. Turn on my armature and then select my armature. So now with everything selected and my armature selected last, I'm going to go to Object, Parent, Parent with Automatic Weights. Now I'm just going to check to see how everything is weighted by clicking in Pose Mode and clicking on each bone and rotating. And so what you're seeing here is that it's kind of bendy, which is not exactly what I want, because I want these to appear stiff. And it could be also because of the way I set up the bones. But what I'm going to do is just kind of test and see what is the name of each bone. So this is 1, 2, or this is 1. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so what I'm going to do is go back to object mode and click on each object and make sure everything is set with the right bones that I want them to be connected to. So this one I want to be connected to bone 2. And so I'm going to get rid of this bone and just do bone 2, and then copy it across all of these points by clicking copy, so that this only moves with bone 2. Then I'm going to set this up do the same thing for this one. Select all and make this for bone 3. Delete these other bones and copy. And then I'm going to click on this little circle here and make this for bone 4. Copy. And then bone 5. Okay, I have to check that for bone 5. All right, so that looks good. All right, now let's check again and see how everything's set up in pose mode. And I can move that. It's looking smooth. It's not looking bendy anymore. Same thing here. This one is getting some dynamic movement. And then this one moves just that circle, and this one moves just the diamond, exactly how I wanted it. Okay, except we don't want that. So I'm just going to delete those other bones. Oops. All right, now back into pose mode, double check again. Yeah, so that won't move that anymore. And now everything's looking nice and clean. I'm going to go back into object mode, and now you just would export this object, and that's how this one is set up, just so that you know. That's exactly how I set up this one, and that's why everything moves the way it does. And so now going into Lens Studio with it saved as an FBX file, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna load it up right below my earring on the left side. What you can see here is I also have makeup. I put the makeup at the bottom of this list so that it goes underneath all of my earrings and everything. And so we're just gonna focus on earrings. I'm not even gonna have the hair occluder or anything in here. We're just gonna add the earrings and work on setting up the physics for it, because physics can be a little complicated and sometimes it can be a little difficult to set up. All right, so we're gonna add our object there, and I'm just gonna resize this 2.5. And so what you see is now it's positioning it a little bit high up. So let's see where on the ear it is. So by clicking on this ear binding, I could see exactly where the ear is being landmarked. So it's being landmarked where it's supposed to be over here, but it's up because my object is placed a little too high in Blender. So I'm gonna lower it to about there. And so it's looking like exactly where I'd want it on the lobe, maybe -3 or 2.9 is kind of a nice place to set it up. So you can see if I wanted to change this positioning to another position on the ear, I could just easily select any of these ear landmarks to move it around. But it really works best as a front lobe type of earring. And so now I want to add some physics to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this word armature. I'm actually just going to rename this bones. And I'm going to give this a physics body by clicking add component. Click physics body. And now I'm going to click intangible and dynamic. And I'm going to select physics root world settings right here for the world settings. And then I'm going to, whoops, just reset that. Go back to scene. Okay, so now going back here, we're going to add a script. So I'm going to click plus sign and then search for helper scripts, then click behavior. Put the behavior at the top of this list under bones. And then I'm going to take this, delete this, add a script, and type in the word chain. The chain should already be in the earring template, so even with everything deleted, all the original assets are still in this resources panel here. So we have some of the makeup that I've created. I have some makeup and stuff that I've gotten from some friends that they made, and yeah, so that's my makeup. Back to the tutorial. So going here, I'm gonna go and I'm just gonna move this out of the way for now. Going back here, I'm gonna go and set up the behavior for this script that we just added with the chain. So first what I'm going to do is add my base anchor. So the base anchor is that thing that I set up here that's called bones. So just typing in the word bones, I can see that there. Then physics matter, I'm going to click and put physics matter. And now I'm going to have to add those bones. And sometimes it could add it and look very bad. So we also have to double check and make sure that the things are working properly and that everything's working cleanly. So it might take some time once you set it up to kind of just work through all the settings and make sure it looks the way you want it to look. But I'm just going to start with my main bones. So I'm going to go to, I'm just going to type in the word bone and they should all come up. So I'm going to do bone 1, then bone 2, and so on. Okay, and so that bone 6 kind of messed it up, I think. Yeah, it still looks kind of weird. Okay, so what we have to do is just kind of play around with these settings and see what makes this look right. So it might take some moments, but I like to play around with the settings and kind of just test and see what works. So I also learned that taking out the main bone that I have for the top is good, because that main bone for that little circle does not need to be there to hold it in place or to make it move. It doesn't need any movement, so I'm just going to delete bone 1. And now we're seeing that things are going to start looking a little bit more real. So cylinder length. First, let's go and show our constraints and the colliders. We can see kind of how it's set up. And you can see it's kind of messy right now because the size is a little bit off. So we just kind of play around with the settings to see like when does things start to look a little bit better. So now it's already starting to look much better. Let's see if I set this to 1, it looks obviously too high, and then 0.1 is a little bit low. So the settings that seem to look nicest for this particular earring is having the cylinder length to 1, the radius to 0.1, and the constraints to 1. I don't necessarily understand how that works perfectly. I'm definitely a beginner with this kind of thing and this template, but so far this looks really nice. So dampening, I believe, will make the movement either a little faster or slower, heavier, I think. I forget how that one works, but you can kind of play around with that and just see if it affects your object and how it affects it. Okay, so now I'm just going to play around with the materials. I'm going to take all of these and set them to gold. So I'm going to go to the asset library and we're going to go to materials and I'm going to find that gold material. Then for our crystal, we could use a double-sided glass material and maybe sparkles material. We could just test those out and see how they look. Okay, so for all of these, I have them all selected. I'm going to select that gold. And I think I need to add a light. Maybe the light needs to be a little stronger. I wonder why that's working that way. And then we can go and add some more of those gold materials that are already within this program. So I liked some of these golds as well. The environment texture, it's like kind of shiny looking. Okay, now for the stone, we could add, I have already imported a soap bubble material, so I'm just going to use that soap bubble material that you could find in the asset library. And now we have this really nice material set up on it. And so the movement looks pretty good and natural, as if this is just like a loop floating on top of this one. And it kind of moves like kind of nicely with your head when you're rotating around. The top one really could use a little less movement, but this can all be optimized. So I'm just going to adjust also the positioning of it. And again, you can go back and you could just continue to play with these settings and just make sure it looks exactly how you want. And again, I kind of preferred the sphere. I mean the cylinder. Okay, so yeah, so I would just say take your object and add your bones. Make sure your bones are set up in Blender or whatever 3D modeling program you use, and set them up the way that I did here so that you know that each object is linked to a proper bone unless you want it to be bendy, and then you can just leave it the way it generates the bones naturally or have them be linked to multiple bones. But I like each bone to be linked to one object for these kind of things if it has metal, because I don't want it to look like it bends. And so that was something that was really important for me for this template and for this tutorial, is just to show that you want to have your metals look solid, and you could do that by customizing the bones in Blender. And yeah, so that's the earring. And if you want to take this earring and move it to the other ear, let's see, or if you want to continue to edit the movement of it, you could play around with it. Let's see, it looks a little off. So if I want to take this earring now and move it to the other ear, I'm just going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to move it to the right. And now I have the earring on both ears, and they both have physics automatically set up. And so that's what makes it so easy, is that you just literally copy and paste it from one ear to the other, and it works perfectly. So that's how I work with physics in Lens Studio. That's how I set up my files in Blender, and that's how I import them and put them into this template. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, and I'll be making more tutorials that are a little bit more complex for the earring template, and also using more bones, and also show you how to make earrings without bones. But for now, I think this one is really fun for starting with. All right, so I'll see you in the next work.